Hello.
Hello, Eric. Hello, Julia. Firstly, thank you very much for accepting my invitation and accepting to be on my show.
Sorry about the time delay mix-up. Well, we can laugh about that in a minute. But glad we can do this anyway. Sorry, you're already up, so might as well go ahead and have the conversation then.
Yeah. So I thought I've gone through your profile and I came to know that you both are writers of X-Men series, and I thought to tell about my audience about you and your work.
That's very kind. We appreciate getting the word out. You know, it's been 30 years since X-Men the animated series has been on the air. And now, at least here in the US, Disney Plus has reissued the show. And it's just great to see more folks still remembering it fondly and all that kind of stuff.
So I assume you saw it when you were younger, when you were growing up. You saw the show then.
Yeah, after connecting with you, I came to know it, and I just saw some of the things, and I have gone through the book also.
Oh,
very
very
good.
nice, very nice.
Yeah. So, to my audience, can you please introduce yourself?
Oh, sure.
Sure. I'm Julia Leewald. I'm a TV live action and animation writer, and I've been doing it for over 30 years now. One of the shows I've worked on was as a writer was on X-Men the animated series. I was able to write Days of Future Past Part 1 for season 1 and other episodes throughout the series run.
And I'm Eric Lewald, and also have been working in TV, writing for television, primarily in animation, for 35 years now. And I was the showrunner on X-Men the animated series, which meant I was in charge of setting up the show, developing the show, and choosing all the people who would write for me, as I was kind of the head writer, overseeing all the other writers.
So, what made you to start this X-Men?
We got lucky. He got a phone call.
Yeah, I was the people that made X-Men, the TV show, happen, or the president of Fox Kids Network, Margaret Lesh, and her assistant Sydney Iwander. Margaret had tried for for over 10 years to get the show on TV.
Here in the U.S., we only had 3 major networks. We had ABC, CBS, and NBC.
3 television networks, and they had not wanted to put that show on the air. So when a 4th network came along, Margaret was hired to run that, and she decided she would put X-Men on the air. Luckily for me, the year before, I had been in charge of the writing of a show for Margaret and Sydney on Fox called Beetlejuice. I did 1 year of that for them. And so when the date came for them to decide who would be in charge of the writing for X-Men, I was one of the number that they chose from because I'd worked with them before. So I established a professional relationship with the people who decided. I didn't know X-Men well at all before the show started.
Very few of us did.
So it wasn't because of my expertise. It was because of the people who were in charge had worked with me before and liked me. So that's my great luck, my great fortune there.
And Eric and I met each other at Disney TV Animation when they were doing the Disney Afternoon. I had begun writing there on Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers, and then Goof Troop, Winnie the Pooh, Darkwing Duck, Tailspin.
Back in the late 1980s was when we started there at Disney.
And he was working there as well, doing the same kind of work, and that's how we met. And then after 3 years in the freelance market, and then you get the call for X-Men.
Yeah. Wow. So before starting this, what was your intention? Have you thought that you're going to do this for 30 years?
You mean just getting into writing in Hollywood in general,
or X-Men specifically? Well, just our own starts in the business, or before X-Men? Which one?
X-Men.
Oh, okay. We really had no plan. We had no plan. I had no plans for X-Men because until the day I got got chosen to be in charge, they when the next day when we went and met the people from Marvel Comics and the Fox people and production people and the artists, they all had ideas for what they thought would be important for the show, about what characters to show, and they had 30 years of comic books stories to refer to, and so they discussed maybe which characters, which stories they liked best, which ones that they didn't want us to maybe use. So they had some opinions on that. That was the basis, the starting point. But then my partner, my head writing partner, Mark Edens, and I were laid out the first 13 stories. And when we did, we chose the stories and we decided what among the many, many, many bits of storytelling had been told in the past, where we would draw scenes from or where we would draw inspiration. So it was pretty much, it was very much left to us. And we looked at it as, say, if you were to come up with new stories for a beloved old character from books that you knew, you'd look at the beloved old character, get a sense of what was good about that character or that group of characters, and then just use those as reference point to tell new stories. So we just tried to tell the best TV story, and TV stories telling is different from comic books. Comic books, it's very static on the page. You have all these, if you read, I assume you read comic books, lots and lots and lots of thought bubble, internal dialogue. What everybody is thinking is is written beside the character. You can't do that in TV. It has to be like on stage. It has to be spoken. So you just had to adjust the way the stories were told to fit television.
One thing that had happened was back in the late 80s, Margaret Lesh was working at Marvel Productions out here and had tried to create a pilot for X-Men, and had done so with what became known as Pride of the X-Men.
As a sample to show how the show might work.
And it did not get any traction at any of the major networks. But there was still a lot of passion between Margaret and the artists to make this kind of show happen. She
discovered many of the good artists when she did that one that was not successful.
So it was kind of an open secret that a Fox X-Men animated series was going to happen. But you didn't know that. So you had been called by Fox and put on hold as a story editor, showrunner on a different show.
Yeah.
And then the night before the big meeting, he got a call that was, "Oh, that show we told you about, you're not going to work on that show. You're going to work on a show about the X-Men." So you had less than 24 hours notice to get ready and go in.
But there, as I said, there are many people involved in our show that had read the X-Men for 30 years. Many of the artists knew them like family, knew them backwards and forwards. So the people on the art side, they did not have to hurry to learn them. I had to hurry to learn and catch up and see which characters meant what to the other characters, and to help tell the stories.
So what do you think that made people to connect with X-Men?
I'm thinking part of just the X-Men books began in the 1960s, and then in the late 70s, they kind of had a renaissance with more international characters.
What made them connect with these characters?
I'm thinking there was something for everybody, I think.
There was in the X-Men history, yes, when the first stories came out, they were just a group of younger, just Americans. And then after that comic book failed, they remade them as more international characters from around the world. That helped, but I think it's because the characters kind of form a dysfunctional family. So they're these very much outsiders. I'm trying to think. They're orphans. They're people that are rejected. They come together, and they're all very much feel alone until they become part of this group of 7 or 8 people that live together and work together and share ideals together. And I think there's something very attractive about people that feel they don't quite fit in their culture and find a home after they struggle and feel very alone and feel very different from the main culture around them. Say they're the wrong caste or the wrong background or the wrong, last name, or, they're an immigrant or whatever. They don't feel part of the main culture. And now they found a place to work and thrive with other people who are maybe different from them, but have agreed to become a family together.
So what is your inspiration behind this?
Funnily enough, I think for you, inspiration was you grew up in an academic household, and your father was big on sharing, telling good stories. That was kind of the baseline for the inspiration. It wasn't so much, Wolverine or Cyclops. It was just trying to tell the best stories. Yeah. Your dad would read you mythology and.
Yeah. So the motivation to do the work was simply, I think we feel the same way. Just we enjoy telling stories, and it happens that television was the job that was available.
Yes.
And we came out here to Southern California, to Hollywood, to try to make a career out of telling stories, and it happened that it was in animation, and that has been very, very satisfying. But it's wanting to be a storyteller.
Are you able to tell the story that is there in your imagination with the animated characters?
Just being able to tell any kind of story in any fashion is such a thrill, such an honor. Speaking specifically about X-Men, one of the big differences, having worked on other shows, was as a writer on the series, I was told from the top down, don't write down to kids. You write up to this audience. You make it as mature, as tough, as emotional, as personal as you can, which you don't often get on what we would call a kid's Saturday morning show. That was a real liberation right there.
Yeah, in American television, over the years, over the many, many decades, there's always been fairly strict rules to work within as far as what sort of stories you could tell. When you're telling stories for adults in the evening, what we always call prime time, the rules are looser, and you can tell more adult stories and more challenging stories and story. But when you're writing specifically for what is thought of as a children's show, which X-Men was, the rules are tighter and tougher and more restrictive. When we'd written for previous children's shows like at Disney and Hanna-Barbera, other places, the rules had been much, much tighter. Yes. At Fox, for X-Men, they realized it was more adult property, and they said, be more challenging, make the stories more adult, make the characters have perhaps fiercer emotions than you would have had in some other shows for children. And they let us, what it felt like, stretch the boundaries of storytelling for children further than they'd been stretched before, certainly in American stories for children.
So what is the favorite thing that makes you to write it continuously?
We weren't allowed to write it continuously. Well, what had happened was you'd been hired to write 13 episodes.
I'll have all the stories continue. Is that, yeah, okay.
13 episodes, one and done. They really didn't think the show was going to hit. So you and your co-writer Mark Eden said, we're going to write the best 13 we can.
But also the people involved who respected the comic books, some of the veteran animation artists, and we all agreed that comic books work very well as a continuing story over 10 or 20 issues of a comic book, and that we thought that bigger, longer, connected stories were a much stronger way you could develop the stories better, and that the audience would be very excited about what would happen next.
Yes.
And we weren't allowed to do that on other shows.
No.
And the reason was that, well, animation at the time was a very expensive, very long process. It would take 8, 9, 10 months from the time you decided to do a story till you got back your 22 animated minutes and could see that it worked well. If the show somehow wasn't working, was poor or unscreenable, if you have individual shows that aren't connected, you can just replace one with another and no one will know which one comes first. But if you have a connected story, 1 through 13 or 1 through 26, then if one is bad, you have to wait and fix that. And that could take a long time. It could be a delay. So they were scared. The business people were very scared about allowing us to do shows that were connected, that were continuous. But all the creative people said, please do this, risk this for us. And so it was a gift.
Yeah.
It was a gift from the business people to us. They said, okay, we'll trust you, do this. So yeah, we were very thankful for having that opportunity.
And a lot of people, the phrase previously on X-Men resonates with them because that started so many episodes with a little bit of a recap.
Yeah.
And that's sort of become a phrase nowadays that folks like to use when referencing the old series, because previously on X-Men, it kind of got into their bloodstream.
Yeah, and showed that they were connected and showed you bits and pieces from the past one in case you've forgotten. That was another thing. They just thought the children would never remember. They said, oh, 5, 6-year-old, if episode number 6 relies on information from episodes 1 through 5, they won't remember any of that, and you'll lose it. No. The kids love to remember.
Yes.
They love to watch it many times and know how they all connect. So that worry was wrong on their part.
So communicating with through the TV and communicating with the book, 2 different mediums. So how this happened?
Very different.
Yeah, well, but for the comic books, the storytelling was different. And then when we had to write, to do books about the making of the show. I don't know if you saw this book or this one, but in writing the books about it, we found that a very tough challenge, because when we're writing the stories, we are one part of this big group of people. We write the stories, and it's very fast schedule, as fast as we can. And here, quick. Now the artists, then they draw a 900 image storyboard that goes to the voice people, record it. The animators hand paint maybe 100,000 paintings to make one episode. They paint it, they photograph it, it comes back. The editors polish. So you have all these stages where if something that you wrote was a little bit off, someone will fix it. There are other people, so many other people that help make the show good. When we're just writing a book, it's just all on us. It's all on me. It's like, we took much longer time going over every word and so we had to fix everything that we did ourselves. In the book. In the TV show, we had friends that would help fix things for us, but the book was just all on us.
So what kids like more about X-Men?
I'm sorry,
what kids like more about X-Men?
We get when we've been able to go to cons and fests, we have a lot of now young adults come up to us and just say when they were really small with X-Men, what they loved was being able to pick out a character on the team and say, okay, on the playground, okay, I'm Rogue, okay, I'm Gambit, I'm Wolverine. There were so many options to choose from for people to play as little kids. And then as they would get a little bit older, coming to realize what each character's personal stories were and how much those could touch a person. None of us are born with mutant superpowers, but the idea of going through puberty or adolescence and just feeling a disconnect from the rest of the world. X-Men really presented that to a lot of young people, a lot of kids, in a way that they could identify with it. And we still, 30 years later, meet folks at fests and cons who were deeply touched by the show when it came out and continue to enjoy it today.
Yeah, we get great satisfaction and are grateful. We meet people who say 30 years ago they were 10 years old and they loved the show. Now they're 40 years old. And they watched the show with their parents, and now they watch the show with their children.
Yeah.
And so it goes 3 generations, and they've all enjoyed the same stories together. So that we get great satisfaction from that.
Yeah.
So what is the difference that you're observing when you wrote the first episode and now?
When we just wrote the first episode, we didn't know how well the show would come to, how magic the show would become for so many people. It was just, we have each worked on over 40 different series over the past years, and you get into them, and each it's a job, and you've got deadlines, and you have colleagues to work with, and so at the time you're just focusing on the craft and just as working as hard as you can to make it as good as you can and meet your deadline. And it's now later when we see them come together that it became something more and grew into something more when we realized, oh, how successful this one was.
Yeah.
That's way different. When it started, it was just, this looks like it could be a very good job, but you don't know for sure. Other jobs we got into looked promising, ended up not so good. So you hope that this is good, but until the show came together and you saw audiences react to it the way they did, you didn't know that it was going to be successful. And of course, then you knew.
So after seeing the reactions, what you felt after the first episode?
There were so many problems and challenges with the first 4 episodes. And the idea was when you began working on the show in February of 92, the goal was to have it begin airing in September of 92.
There were great delays and problems the first year. It was a much more ambitious show than the business people had budgeted for. So there were problems getting it to look right and to sound right. But finally, when it came out in January and it showed, and it was a success. When we finally saw a good polished version of the first episode, I think we all knew. We felt confident when the first script was done. We and the artists, when we saw the first storyboard of the first script, so months before the episode was done, we felt confident that we could have something special. You still don't know until it's actually produced. But after that first viewing, I think everybody came together and realized, okay, this could be something special. Let's keep working hard on this and do the next 13 and the next 13. And then, so that gave us confidence. But then when it became a big popular hit, then there was also this challenge. Well, you can't just coast and rest on your laurels and now people expecting more of you. When the first season, they weren't quite sure what to expect. It becomes very popular. They want it to be bigger. So second season they're going to have higher expectations. So that could have been scary, but it was just, at the time, it was very satisfying that something was successful. And what that also means in our just personal lives is that there's another year of work.
Yes.
So it means another year of income, so it was very good for it to have succeeded, and we felt we felt vindicated in our creative choices, because until you see it, people have very different ideas about what makes X-Men what tone to give it, or what kind of stories, gentler, smaller, bigger, more spectacular, whatever, more character driven. You have to make these choices and you hope that it turns out right. And sometimes you have people telling you to change it and you have to fight them and say, no, we don't want to change it. And if it comes out right, then you feel vindicated in what you chose.
A thing that had happened was the show was supposed to come out in September of '92. The first 4 episodes came back, but the 3rd episode had so many animation problems it was unviewable, unairable. So Margaret Lesh, to her credit, rather than air them out of order, she delayed it, and she made the commitment to do what was called a sneak preview of parts 1 and 2 on Halloween night in October.
Yeah.
With the idea then that by January, the 3rd episode could have been repaired enough that it would then be able to show in sequence. Also did a sneak peek on Halloween night, October here. Big hit. We weren't expecting that because Halloween is typically when kids are out getting candy. Kids aren't home watching primetime cartoons. But it was a huge hit. And they did another sneak peek in November. Same 2 episodes, same big hit. And then when January came around, most of the shows at that point had run in September, so they were already starting to do reruns. X-Men came out as a brand new series with brand new episodes.
In January.
And it blew the ratings off the roof. It did huge numbers. What was it like? There were some Saturdays that
in the U.S. half the TVs were on Saturday morning were on X-Men. So that was again very satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't just because something's successful for a week or two doesn't mean it's going to sustain.
Right.
So that was then the challenge to keep it going and keep the stories good or better from what we just started at the beginning. But it was a very good start.
So you saw the evolution of the technology in these 30 years. So have you changed the way you wrote? You are writing the story?
Well, technology didn't change much during the time we were writing X-Men. Things became more and more computerized in the 90s and 2000s. And one of the things that changed was when we did X-Men, it was all hand painted.
Yeah.
And the first couple X-Men were even done on film. They weren't done on video. So it was very much an old-fashioned 20th century process. And then as in later series that we worked on that became more and more computerized, you realize there's just certain things that are more effective in a more computerized show. Like once they've drawn something into the computer, they can reuse it and reuse it and reuse it. Mm-hmm. Whereas with the painting, you might have to repaint that each time.
Yeah.
So there are certain ways you adjust to your writing to reuse locations in a computerized series. But within X-Men, the technology didn't evolve that much. The writing was pretty much the same all 5 seasons.
So writing for children. So how you felt?
In my case, it was the opportunity to write for anything first presented itself to write for children's animation. And I was determined to try and crack the Hollywood nut somehow. So that was my way in. And I've been very happy continuing to do that for the last 30 years.
Yeah, it's a strange thing to mention to people, but there's so much competition for the wonderful situation of being able to make a living writing stories out here in Hollywood. There's for every position, there's probably 1,000 people that would like that position.
Yeah.
That we both moved out here from other parts of the U.S.
We met here, but we each came from way away.
We knew no one in the business at all. We knew no one in the city. So we both said, each of us said, well, I'd like to write for television. Does that mean for adults in the evening, children Saturday morning? Does that mean movies? Does that, what are the options? And nowadays there are more and more and more. There are hundreds of stations streaming everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, it was a fairly small bit of opportunity. There was television, which was most of the work, and there's a little bit in movies.
That's right.
And so this has happened to many people we know. They want to try to find a way into this very restricted business, and it's just the first opportunity I happened to get was my neighbor was working at Hanna-Barbera writing cartoons for children, and he came home one day and he knew that I'd written many scripts, many stories just for myself. And he said, well, we just got a big order. They doubled the amount of work they need, and so they're open to seeing new writers. Why don't you give me something? I'll show my boss. So I have this opportunity, 1 hour here, quick, here's got this opportunity. The boss said, yes, I like this writing fine. Means that they now will take my phone calls. They now will to listen to me if I want to try to write on a show. And so that was my break. That was my opening of the business. It happened to be in children's animation. If my neighbor had been in situation comedies or in television dramas or whatever, I would have maybe had the same opportunity. With luck, would have also impressed the boss, and then might have had 35 years in situation comedies instead of. So it wasn't that either one of us came here thinking we're going to do children's animation. That was the door to open, the opportunity that was offered to us, and we did it as well as we could. And then it's funny. Then when you do something, then more people want to hire you doing the same thing. So it kind of builds,
yeah,
and has a life of its own. So yeah, that was.
So holding the interest of the eyeballs and being consistent, what is your motivation? What is driving you to make people to sit and watch?
That's a fair question. When I was growing up, it never occurred to me to move to Hollywood and try and break into the business. That wasn't on my radar. I grew up in Texas, and I loved TV and film, as a person who enjoys television and films, but had no idea that you could try to make a go of it yourself, career-wise. I always loved to write, in a notebook, in a piece of paper, whatever, just a short story, a poem, an idea, a line, didn't matter. I just like to write without any sense of what to do with it, but just I enjoyed the process of writing. Then senior year of college, the idea came to a friend that she was going to move to California and asked if I wanted to come with her to see because she knew I liked to write. And she said, people get paid to write in Hollywood. Why don't you give it a shot? Never occurred to me until then to lift up stakes and move. But I did. It took 10 years. I don't want to minimize any of this. It took me 10 years from the day I got to Los Angeles to the day I got paid to be a writer. Writing spec scripts, meeting people, making connections. And it came down to, in the same way with Eric, met a gal on a softball team who knew I was trying to crack the market, trying to get a job as a writer. And she was working at Disney Afternoon, and she said, you don't need to have an agent, you can just come pitch. Mm-hmm. And that was my way in. I went in every Friday for weeks pitching to the folks at Disney Afternoon, and bless their hearts, I came up with an idea they liked for Chippendales Rescue Rangers, and that morphed into a writing opportunity for the script, and then from there, the opportunity to be on staff. Mm-hmm. So it could have been, as Eric said, the gal I met on softball could have been doing any other kind of writing, if the opportunity had presented itself, I would have jumped on that too, just as a way to get in the door. Because you don't know what's going to be the big break. You don't know.
Yeah.
Plenty of things fall through. Like I said, 10 years of scrambling, trying to figure out how to crack in, how to get in.
Yeah. Well, to answer your question, I think what motivated me was loving the storytelling of other people. Is growing up loving movies and certain television shows, but and books, short stories and novels. So just loving myself getting lost in stories and having a favorite TV show. It's like someone falls in love with music and wants to compose their own music. So I fell in love with movies and TV in college. We showed movies at college and so I helped program all the movies that were shown at college.
You asked about technology. This was this was before VHS.
Yeah. This was before reels of film would help be the one in the projection booth showing the movies.
Yeah.
So I loved visual storytelling, and so that made me want to think, well, maybe I could do that for a job. That you don't always get to do that. Just because you love music doesn't mean that someone's going to pay you to be a musician. You hope so, but so I'm sure that was the motivation from the very beginning to come out here and try. And if I hadn't succeeded, I still would love watching movies and watching good television series. Mm-hmm. But that's where it started, from being enchanted. It wasn't music, it wasn't business, it wasn't religion. It was the thing that caught my imagination as a child was movies. So that's where that came from.
So X-Men was the thought came before 30 years. So what do you think that is making people to connect with it every year?
Oh, to continue to connect with it.
That's a good question.
I don't know. Most things don't last.
No.
Yeah. Many of the things that say you enjoy as a child, you don't necessarily enjoy as an adult, or
your taste changes.
Or you look back and say, oh, that's old-fashioned or dated, or that might have been fun for people in 1970 or 1990 or 10 years ago, but now, no one's interested. And why certain stories or certain TV shows or certain movies, why they last the test of time. And, surely there must be books or movies that say your parents liked and that you would like as well, but there aren't that many. Most of them they're of their time and they're gone. And I don't know what the magic is. I don't know what the magic is that makes something last. What the little spark of humanity is, or what is special about when I was very, very young, the TV show Star Trek started. And I thought, oh, this is special. But, that was 60 years ago when that, and so there's no reason to believe that would, but it has stayed. And people continue to become fascinated by those characters. Why? I couldn't tell you, but it grabbed me when I was a little boy. And now, I can still watch those shows and say, I could still appreciate the stories. And I wish I knew the secret, but just some things continually fascinate people, and it's wonderful if you get a chance to be part of one. And this is the one we've been part of.
I think too, looking back at the time when X-Men the animated series was being created, there had been 30 years of comic book X-Men, and it had been very successful, and it was a very popular book. But as big as that was, it was still just the comic book arena. Comic books did not have a fraction of the market they have today. And then X-Men, the animated series, comes along and introduces an entire TV generation to these characters. And I think, and I'll take it with me, that X-Men, the animated series, is the thing that paved the way for Marvel superhero movies, beginning with the X-Men live action films, and then Iron Man, Thor, the Avengers, by creating an audience back in the early 90s who found the X-Men through the X-Men animated series.
Yeah. And television movies and the internet are so wonderfully international.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 50 years ago or 100 years ago, you know, things didn't necessarily move all across cultures, across the planet. But when X-Men came out, Fox was very good at exporting it, making sure that every country television stations had a chance to show it. So we meet people everywhere. We're from South America, from Asia, from Europe, New Zealand. We meet people from everywhere. I grew up watching your show. It's an American show, but at the time, a lot of a good deal of their TV was American produced, and it was one that my friends and I fell in love with. So people again from the other side of the world grew up watching our stories and sharing them with their friends and their families, and that was even more impressive to us than just our children watch and their friends watch, something more smaller and local. It evidently went worldwide, and that was because I guess in the 1990s, more and more TV became international.
Can I say both are the experts understanding emotions, because you're able to connect with your communication skills and being behind the scenes.
Was that asking how we do that? How how we connect emotionally? Yeah, I'm gonna say it comes down to who are your characters, and what is the thing that matters most to them?
Yeah, it's through the characters. It's not through the spectacle. It's not through the political themes. It's not through the plot. The beginning, middle, and end of the story. It's through what the characters are going through. And I think for us and the artists, because the artists had to draw all those characters, and the voice artists had to voice the characters and make their emotions real. I think we had an instinctive connection with these characters to where when we're writing them, we'd make sure to give them a scene that expressed what we hoped was a real depth of emotion from them about friendship or about family or about life and death or about whatever. So we were lucky that these characters were well drawn to start with, because we inherited them, but we pushed on their personal stories in ways that I think many other television shows and children's shows particularly don't bother. They'll have characters go through through a small adventure and it's gone, and they don't. I think we pushed the characters' emotions as far as we could push them, given our limits, and that seemed to connect with people.
They happen to have superpowers. These characters,
which are fun,
which are great and shiny, and they make for lovely spectacle. But each one of them is got emotional turmoil, conflict, trauma in their own lives, and that to me was where the success of the show came from, in terms of people coming back to watch these characters continue to work through these challenges that they faced. And again, 30 years later, people still, enjoy the show and speak to the gravity of what we were able to do. You made the point, we were able to push things emotionally. That's because we couldn't push things violently. There was a genuine line
Restrictions.
that we could not cross. So you don't see Wolverine literally slicing a human being apart and blood flying everywhere, but you see him internalize that rage and the fury that he's feeling and having to work it out in a different way. And I think that made for more compelling stories. It would have been easier to slice people up or shoot them with laser blasts, but it made for more interesting storytelling to have to work within those confines.
Yeah, and I think a lot of action cartoons, a lot of action television shows don't make their heroes very vulnerable. They make them so super capable that they laugh about the danger and they always win. And I think we tried to make our characters as vulnerable as we could, even though they had superpowers, make them emotionally vulnerable and personally vulnerable and heartbroken and sometimes defeated and sometimes struggling. And so we made making them as humanly vulnerable as possible, I think, made it easier for people to identify with them and get close to them.
You are able to connect with different country people who are living in different parts of the world with the characters that you have, with the imagination that you have. So, what do you think that worked for you?
Sure, I got that. I'm sorry. Were you asking about just how did we make it globally?
Yeah.
I mean, I really think it comes down to, I keep saying this, but the character. And if you take the character and deal honestly with the conflict, then that's universal. That's the more specific you make a character, the more universal it really is. There was a movie several years ago, comedy, called My Big Fat Greek Wedding. It was a big hit here in the United States, and I think all over. It was all about this one crazy family with all the stuff that was part of their Greek tradition, their heritage. But everyone, I have an uncle who's like that, even if you're not Greek, or that's like my crazy aunt over there. I mean, there was so much specificity that everyone could relate to it. I think with something like X-Men and around the world, there was something for everybody to sort of latch on to, just as far as what each character represented and which one you as a person might respond to.
Yeah, and I think they were, even though there's so very many cultural differences around the world, I think some things seem to be constant. I mean, feelings of affection and betrayal, feelings of friendship and belonging or not belonging, feelings of, fear of death,
fear of rejection.
Yeah, just we tried, we hope that what the X-Men are going through as people really are universal, and so someone anywhere can appreciate what they're going through.
So, what are your favorite characters?
It was so much fun writing for the character Beast, just because he was the smartest guy in the room. And as writers, we all like to think that we were the smartest people in the room. And he was just so much fun to write for him. Also in the series, Eric came up with the idea that Beast would quote obscure, not necessarily obscure, but
obscure poets.
Obscure poets when as a call to battle. And we had, again, this was before the internet. We had fun trying to find an appropriate quote in an old book that would be right for the episode. That was a fun challenge.
Yeah. And for me, I think for most fans, their favorites tend to be Wolverine or Gambit, and for a lot of the women, it's usually Storm or Rogue. Mm-hmm. Some people that got into it were very young. It's Jubilee is their favorite because she was the teenager among all these adults, and that was her way in. And it was gratifying to find out that all of the characters are somebody's favorite. Mm-hmm. But for me, since I was a supervisor, I had over the course of 5 years, I had 20 different writers work on the show. She was one.
I was one.
But there were 19 others, all of whom I had to try to keep the writing kind of consistent and feel like it's the same show. So I felt very much like Professor X, that I was the kind of the father figure with all the writers working for me and try to keep them from very, very different people from going off in various directions, keep the project going. So I empathize with him a great deal and appreciate him. So often he's in the background because he can't really fight. He can't be out there in the middle of the action most of the time. But I felt he was crucial to the storytelling.
So at last, I want to say to the X-Men fans for watching and listening to our conversation from different parts of the world.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just saying, what can we say to fans? I'm having.
Yeah.
Oh heck, please. We're just grateful if you found X-Men the Animated Series and you're continuing to enjoy X-Men the Animated Series. That's amazing for us.
Yeah, it's a wonderful to meet fans because we go to comic book conventions, we meet people that know the show, but when we're doing our creative work, when we're writing, we're alone at our desk.
Yes.
And there's no audience, there's no one to react. You don't know if you've done well, you've done poorly, if whereas say if you're a singer or a musician or a stage actor, you're in front of people, and if you sing, people applaud, you feel that you've succeeded with your audience. So when we meet people now after that watch our show and say it was their favorite show, it's like being an audience hearing applause.
Yeah.
It makes us feel like we've connected, and that's why you do the work in the first place. I mean, you do the work to pay your bills, but you do the work so that someone will hear it and someone will appreciate it. So it means a great deal to us that people all over the world have seen the show and like it. We
weren't really as aware of that fact until about 5 years ago when you took it. He began working and writing the oral history of the show in this book that just came out in 2017. That gave us an opportunity to start going to cons and fests because we really hadn't before. And so over the last 5 years, meeting people, seeing all the folks in cosplay for the X-Men animated characters, it's been wonderful. I assume you have comic book conventions, comic conventions in your city. Or maybe, yeah. So people all dress up as their favorite characters. And when we go to the comic book conventions, many of the people are dressing up as the characters we wrote for X-Men. Yeah. So it makes us feel very happy to see everybody dressed up as our characters.
So it's amazing that you are able to make people to feel that and be the reason for their strongest emotions with the imagination of yours.
Yes. Thank you for that.
Thank you for that. Yeah. There are moments on the show that I can go back to specific episodes and I will still start crying. I will still start tearing up. There is some very emotional stuff in the show, and thank you for that, for saying that.
So I hope you continue being connected with your audience and with your fans and with the imagination that you have, and I hope it will be more effective in coming days.
Thank you so much. If folks would like to reach out to us, I don't know if you can see this, but I am on Twitter for the two of us at X-Men TAS. That's for X-Men the Animated Series, X-Men TAS. On Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and that's also our website. And it's the two of us. Yes. It's just the two of us.
And on our website, there are a couple of hundred notes about stories about blogs about making the movie, making this show.
More behind the scenes.
And behind the scenes things and how we made decisions on certain stories, and some nice images, some pictures of various people that helped make the show. So there's a lot of fun stuff on the website.
So I'll put the website link on the screen and as well as in the description of this video. People who find the video on YouTube can see it and can see what you are doing and what you are going to tell.
Thank you very much for that. We very much appreciate that.
Yeah. And at last, what is your observation about my work? Have you seen any videos of mine on YouTube?
I am impressed by the breadth and depth of your expertise. Is that the word? You have very interesting people that you reach out to. I'm not sure why you reached out to us, but it's very nice that you did. I kind of think we're not necessarily in the same. A lot of educators, professionals, and so it's flattering that you reached out to us. So thank you for that.
So I personally did masters in software engineering and bachelor's in computer science and engineering. So
there you go.
Me trying to communicate with the experts like who are already in the industry and who has huge knowledge, who knows how things work. So collecting all this information, how this is going to helpful for me if I work in IT with this knowledge.
I can tell you, over the last 30 years, and look, cell phones, these didn't exist. This didn't exist. The ability to communicate, whoever you're talking to, about whatever you're talking about, being able to. Our younger son has a bachelor's in mathematics and a master's in mathematics, and taught for a while, is now doing research work. The ability to communicate with someone, like if you're trying to explain a problem or a situation, or try and get an answer, it's really important to be able to communicate.
And he works for a company where he's usually the only American on the Zoom call. There's usually his team of 8 or 10 people. There's someone everywhere
across the globe.
There's three in Asia. There's 2 in Europe. There's 2 in South America. There's maybe 2 in America. But and it's just normal. It's just what he's used to. He grew up playing video games that way. When you were younger, when your first video games, online video games, and you're playing, and you connect, and there's someone from Brazil, and there's someone from Australia, and there's you, and how is it? And you become friends. You become friends playing video games, and the internet does all these things, makes this huge world so tiny. It's wonderful.
But again, for you doing what you do, reaching out to people and being able to communicate. I mean, and again, our apologies. We weren't aware of the time zone difference when we set up the interview with you. But again, this is magic that we can talk to you, even if it is way too early. Yeah. So thank you.
So thank you again. Can I put this video on my YouTube channel with your permission?
Please.
Please, yes, please do.
And also, can I put this video and audio clip on my podcast, website, internet, social media, everywhere with your permission?
Yes, please. And let us know. And we can put that on our, we'd be happy to post that on our websites too, our Twitter stuff.
We'll post a link when,
Let us know when it's available. That'd be great.
And also, I'll share the Amazon book links, which are there in the description. People who find the video can also read what you wrote and what is making you to do so many things.
That's very kind. And we can put in a pitch for next year, sometime in 2023. We don't know when. X-Men 97 has been announced by Disney Plus. So that will
come out next year. So we're some very wonderful young people your age that are making the new show.
But they've invited us to come on board as consulting producers. So we are on that show along with Larry Houston, who was one of the art directors
but
on the original series.
We look forward to that in about a year's time when it comes out next year.
Whenever it comes out
next year.
Yeah.
We'll it's a continuation of our series.
Yeah, that's gonna be fun.
It's not a newly thought out. It's taking our characters and telling further stories. So we're very excited for that.
Yeah.
So it shows your commitment and it shows the interest. It shows your passion. Writing for years and years. I hope you continue writing this for more 30 years, and I hope your imagination will impact more number of people on this planet.
Well, thank you, Sai. Thank you very much.
That is the nicest thing you could say to us. Thank you so much for that. We really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you again.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye.
Ready. Bye-bye.